know you are all here for AI's role in visionary projects. My name is Emi Kolawade. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm going to be wildly insufficient to the people who are assembled here on the panel. And I'm just going to dive right in. But really, really quickly, I want to get kind of a show of hands. How many of you are using AI right now on a project? Whew, okay. Y'all know more than me. Let's move. I want to go down the line, just a really brief intro, and tell us just a little bit about what you're excited about right now in the AI space. Just one thing that you're super excited about, but who you are, where you're from, maybe who you work for if you're feeling like it, and we can go from there.
Yes, hey everyone, I'm Riva Kajangu, originally from Congo, and I've been in America since 2001, I guess, so 25 years. I live in Atlanta, and let's see, I can share, well, I'm working in the startup, so I can talk about that, but as far as one thing I'm excited about or looking forward to right now, the fact that there's a conversation about it. Like, normally when new technology comes out, you know, it's either isolated or remote, not accessible to everyone, but everyone's kind of literally talking about it. My mom's like, hey, what's this AI thing? I'm like, all right, something is happening, so that's one thing I'm excited about.
Hi, my name's Amnahir, or Amnahir. I am a material scientist, so a little different from computer scientists, but I think it just shows how AI can be used in anything. Currently a White House fellow at NIST, which does do a lot of AI work, which I am not involved with. And so I won't be speaking from NIST perspective. Everything's my own personal opinion based off of what I'm doing with AI in my own time. But I'm really excited to see, I think, the conversation about AI is getting very excited. And right now, I think we're trying to grow what AI can be used for and how can it be applied to a lot more than just ChatGPT or something that might be more commonly known, and seeing how it can be used in different areas within the sciences and the engineering world, which I'm excited for.
Hey everybody, Hector Mujica, Miami-based. I lead corporate philanthropy for Google across the Americas. And Google's doing a lot in AI, as you might imagine. And you know, I saw that raise of hands earlier on who's using AI in a project. I would argue that every hand should have gone up, because that's the beauty of AI. I think it's integrated into so many aspects of technology that we might not even realize that we're using it in every single day in our everyday interactions with technology. And I think that's what makes me the most excited, right? It might not be you having to log into Gemini or GPT or another large language model, but it's just so seamlessly being folded into so many facets of our daily lives. And it's going to have so many implications for the ways that we build, design, interact, solve problems. And that's really exciting. And it's changing so quickly, which I think is also both a challenge and an opportunity, the quick pace of innovation that we're going through.
Fantastic, thank you, Hector. I think you raise a really important point, which is that AI is not a monolith. It's not just one single technology. It's a host of different technologies, extending even into the energy space, extending into the policy space in some cases, where people are writing policies that influence the design of the technologies that you're using. We're talking about everything from generative models to algorithmic decision models, et cetera. It's a very, very big space. So thank you, Hector, for raising that. Riva, I'd like to go into, you mentioned you are working on a startup. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and how this suite of technologies is playing out for you.
Yeah, so I'll start maybe with the problem statement. So at least in the US, the data is 1 in 36 kids will be diagnosed with autism, which it's been growing since 2000. It was I think 1 in 150, and now it's 1 in 36. So as you can see, the trend is going up. And autism is super tough because it's not curable, right? So families have to deal with it for the rest of their lives. Now the challenge there is like kids are being diagnosed too late, like maybe around 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 to 11. In fact, my little cousin, he's on the spectrum, and he was diagnosed around 10 years old. And therapy is much hard at that age because you know they've been living with this for so long. And so I was like, well, what can I do with it? So I built a platform to where parents can screen for autism as early as possible. Because signs shows around 1.5 to 2 years old. And so if parents had a tool at home, they can screen for the kids at home and not have to wait until the kids start developing all the challenges much later in life. So that's kind of the big feature of a platform, but I implement some AI into it so that we can give parents more information. And we do that by analyzing data they provide, which is their images, videos, and text, give them more insight into kind of what's going on in the development of the children. And that's the major part of AI. But the actually long-term proposition is that we'll have a lot of data of what's going on at home. So if you know anything about autism, all the data kind of exists in clinical settings at hospitals, universities, but they don't really have data of what's going on at the house. And so our platform can do something like that because parents start uploading of any symptoms they see, any problems they see, and we can start coming together. And I'm already talking to some researchers to where they feel like they can use this data and trying to understand a little more what's going on and how they can help this long term. But that's my startup.
Can you say a little bit about data security, which is something I know a lot of folks are concerned about, particularly a lot of folks in the diaspora, and also data availability. So when we're talking about what data is available to do the intelligence on the data that these parents are providing, can you say a little bit about security and then representation and availability?
Oh, that's a great question. And if you know anything about AI, it's really just data at the end of the day, right? It's just really data. Now, the way we're implementing, or at least trying to make it as secure as possible, the parents own the data. It's their content, right? Anything you upload on social media, it's in the public space, right? So it can kind of be used any way it can. But for our platform, we say, okay, parents, you own the data. We don't own it. And it's not publicly available. So when you log into the platform, it's your login, it's your information. You don't have to worry about sharing it externally to any other platform. So that's one way to keep it safe as far as like the data goes. Now, from the security standpoint, there's many things you can do to keep it secure. One, of course, multi-authentication factors, meaning you have a password, but you also have an email verification. You also have a text verification to keep it super secure because you don't want to lose that. In fact, I highly recommend to everybody here, make sure you add that extra layer of security by having a phone number or email verification after your password. And I think most platforms offer that. Now, as far as the long-term effect, so because we're in the health or development health space, that data is actually valuable. It can help many other families after we're done here, or after we're done with our platform, because it can be used in research. It can be used to understand much further on what's going on. So that's the richness of the data that parents are providing. And I think I covered most of those areas.
I think you got it. It's a big topic. I'm sure people will follow up at lunch. Amnahir, I'd love to get into your visionary project. A lot of people don't think that hardware is an AI thing, but hi guys, robotics, anyone? Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and how it can expand our perspective on AI.
Okay, yeah, so I think, as you said, a lot of people right now, when they think of AI, it's kind of a buzzy, hot topic, and there might be just one perspective about what it is, which is like code online that you can use. But really, artificial intelligence just falls under learning. So you have machines that can adapt to the situation that it's around, adapt to what it's doing. And I think that's one aspect that people kind of forget. It's been around since like the 50s, so, before computers really were even a thing. So it is quite important to think about. And what I'm passionate about, or what I'm trying to do, is create clothing that can kind of make the wearer safer. So having sensors, having motors within it that can alter your gait, alter how you're doing physical activity to make sure you don't get injured, you don't bend the wrong way, you don't have any problems with that. And I think that might sound a lot of, well, I'm a material scientist, so that's where I focus, the materials, the sensors, creating them. But really looking into how can they learn? How can they adapt to seeing, okay, the person who's wearing it right now, they might be bending this way most often. This is what causes those types of injuries. How can we adapt to that? How can we keep growing and learning? And so I think that's something that's really important to learn and to realize about AI, where when it's a buzzy hot topic, what you're reading online is just one facet of what it falls under. And just realizing that anything that is adapting to new data being implemented, new information being added into the software is technically AI. And so working on it in that respect. And to also touch upon the data, another important thing when you're looking at AI in general, even just the software side, is make sure you're careful about realizing what data they're using, where it comes from, and how much is there. You have a lot of places that might be saying, oh, we're AI, we've been using it, and they have 5 data points. You could analyze 5 data points yourself and kind of get a trend. And so make sure that before using anything, you kind of do a little bit of research into how exactly are they using the data? What are they learning from? Just to, yeah.
Totally. I think that leads us to Hector pretty naturally. Hector, interest of full disclosure for everybody, I am ex-Google. I'm relatively familiar with a lot of the work Hector's doing. It's incredible stuff. Hector, how do people get their hands on the technology to realize these visionary projects that they want to do? I think one of the big gaps is between knowing this exists and actually executing to use it. Can you walk people through how to get hands-on, how to really get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Was I the only one that when Amnahir was describing her project thought about Iron Man?
Totally.
Yeah, that's where my head went. Goals. Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back and maybe outline kind of some of the trends that I think we're seeing, and then that'll lead me into your question. I spoke earlier about the rapid pace of innovation that we're going through right now. I think it's quite remarkable when you put it into this framing. It took human civilization hundreds of thousands of years to get through into what we now call the agricultural revolution, right? Like farming and food production as we know it today. Then a few other tens of thousands of years to get into the industrial revolution, another couple of thousands of years to get into this technological revolution. And now it's just taking us sometimes a year, maybe a few months, sometimes a few days to make leaps and bounds in how we're progressing in the artificial intelligence space and the quantum space and the machine learning space, right? And I think that's truly remarkable. There's something happening here that's really fast-paced and that's really challenging the systems and the infrastructure that we have as a society to meet the moment, whether it be culturally, whether it be politically, whether it be technologically. It's really, really pushing us to the brink. And that, of course, includes the economy and how we ascribe value and create and generate value. And most of us do that by working and earning a wage. And, the very nature of work is being altered right now. And for us at Google and for us at Google.org, we often think about, hey, how do we ensure that as technology is advancing, as society is pushing forward in this rapid pace, that we are not leaving those wide open gaps in terms of adoption, in terms of access, and how do we ensure that everyone has an equitable, fair shot at being able to participate and engage with this technology to create value. So to do that, we follow a bunch of standard playbooks. We've leaned into things like we have a $120 million fund right now where we're deploying capital against best-in-class workforce development and skills providers that are out there bringing artificial intelligence competencies and proficiencies to a wide range of constituencies around the globe with a goal of reaching millions of individuals with exposure, training, capacity, and competency building. So for us, really, that's the baseline. How do we ensure that everyone across the world is going to have access to this transformative technology? Because we truly believe that for this technology to be fully actualized, it matters that everyone has a say in how we're building it, not just using it, how we're building that next generation of technology. And also how we're providing the right degree of data, right? We've spoken about that these tools, at the end of the day, they're large language models, emphasis on the large, and they're just consuming a large amount of data. And data bias is a real thing, right? If a majority of the data that's available to these systems comes from a particular worldview, a particular lens, a particular lived experience, then these models are gonna reinforce those existing biases. So then how do we also help bring in new data sets that might not be currently digitized, that might not be currently being fed into these systems to help improve the overall well-roundedness of the system itself. The other thing that I'll mention also as I'm talking about access and workforce is there's of course, the doom and gloom scenario that a lot of people lean into and that people speak about, the Terminator scenario or like the machines taking over all the jobs and then the humans have nothing to do. I would argue that a lot of the research that we've seen so far indicates that the technology is going to augment human productivity and potential. It's not going to replace. And, I was just recently reading a report from the World Economic Forum, and they were indicating that about 7%, they expect about 7 to 15% of jobs to be fully automated, fully replaced. But 6 times that, 6x, is going to be the number of jobs that are going to be augmented by this technology, which means that when you bring this technology adjacent to an individual, when you have a human in the loop, this technology is actually being much more proficient, much more impactful, actually increasing productivity, efficacy of the work. So to me, it's really how do we ensure that everyone, one, has access to that technology, the proficiency, and that they're adopting it at an equitable pace so that they too can be successful and launch the next great startup or discover the next great, scientific breakthrough that's gonna propel us forward. And ultimately, that's gonna require, again, creating pathways so that everyone can have access to this great technology.
Amnahir, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about specifics. What models are you using? How does it play with the actual physical materials that you're working with? Bring us a little bit into specifics about the tools, because I mean, for a lot of this stuff, folks can go online and give things a shot. Can you pull us behind the curtain a little bit?
Okay, yeah. That's a good question. I'm gonna touch. It's that's intense. So, yeah. I am a coder, so a lot of what I do is my own code that I've written, which I think is not too helpful. I will say
it kind of is though, because it's really inspiring for folks who should go about.
Oh yeah. And I will say, I think one of the things about accessibility and how you're able to use it. For me, well, I came into grad school, and that's when I started learning about all of this. I was a hardcore material scientist. I was like, I don't want to code ever in my life. I hate that. Then I realized in this day and age, you sadly can't really get by as an engineer doing that. So I had to learn, and I had a lot of friends who focused on machine learning, and they would sit down and talk through lines of code with me and be like, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that. And that's how I started to learn. And since I no longer can just call up my friend and have them sit with me for hours on end, since I'm across the country and that's an unreasonable friendship, I would say that using the internet is your best bet. I don't think there's been a single thing that I haven't been able to hard code. I use, I don't like paying for things. I apologize. So I'm using my dad's ChatGPT right now, and it works quite well. But that's also why I'm coding my own things, so I don't have to pay all these subscription fees. But I would say anything you want to figure out how to do, if you want to make your own code, you can just go on Google and literally type exactly what you want. I'll be like, I need code that will fit this data set with a model of this type of thing. Stack Exchange, I don't know if any of you guys have heard it.
Love it.
Is essentially a resource where people post their problems and then solutions. You can copy and paste that and change maybe 2 words, and it'll do exactly what you want it to do. So it's way more accessible than you think, and it looks scary because you're like, here are 14 lines of code, which is essentially me going and looking at 14 sentences in another language and having no idea what it means. But once you Google, okay, this one has a word that looks like, I don't know, fitting a curve. So I'm gonna Google what this word specifically means, and from there you can kind of figure it out. And I think it works really well. And I would say that's kind of the easiest way to go into this. Just go step by step. But that doesn't mean you have to start like you'd learn a language. We're in Colombia. You could start learning Spanish and you'd probably want to learn 1 word at a time. With code, you don't have to do that. You can learn essentially paragraphs at a time because a lot of it does translate well. And I would say that's one of the easiest ways to go about using it. But another thing I was going to say about accessibility and how to use it for your own projects, I think there's a lot of, well, I've been saying it a bit, a lot of hype around AI where a lot of people want to use it because it sounds good. And I will say, I went to grad school at Stanford. There wasn't a single person who didn't find a way to use AI in their startup just because that's how you get more funding. And so I think there's a lot of aspects where you might not even need AI to do what you want to do, but if you do decide that you want to use it, I think you should be very smart about what exactly is it going to help you with. Hector was talking about it's more of an augmentation, a tool to help you. So it's really looking like, what do I have that I can't quickly analyze myself? What data do I have that I would want another person to check? Or I want to include this other model that maybe has more data than just what I have, and that can improve my code, or it can improve the work that I'm doing in. And I think that's really important to think less of, I want to use this because it sounds cool, or I want to use this because everyone says it'll be really helpful, and more thinking, what are the challenges that I can't solve myself, and how is AI fit for that. And I think that's how you can learn exactly which tool to use, because there's so many that you can go through one by one and see, okay, this one's good at making images, and that's what I'm struggling with, how to make graphics so that people can learn about my project. Or this one's really good at creating content, like writing styles that maybe I can't tailor it to the audience I want, but I can tell this code which audiences I want, and they have more experience with that. And so I think that's a really important way to think about it when you're using it for your own projects.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. One thing that stands out to me from what you said is this is less about kind of the traditional understanding of education, which is I go to school, I learn what I need to learn, and I get the job. This is more, I'm curious about what I want to solve for. I go get the knowledge, I solve for it using technologies and figuring out how other people have gone about the solution, and I start to progress from there in terms of going directly into the activity I want. Riva, you and I had talked previously about the product manager mindset, and now while I recognize your startup is not your day job, you do bring that skill set from your day job into this project. Can you say a little bit about what the product manager mindset looks like, kind of following up on what Amnahir said, in terms of how you're applying that to building your own startup and leveraging these technologies?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of content here, so hopefully you guys will take your notes and feel free to ask questions afterwards. So the mindset, which is really how you approach a problem, all right? So in product management, it's kind of beginning with the end in mind, but also keeping a curious mind, right? So you don't, the biggest thing to avoid is assumption, right? You can go and say, oh, AI is kind of confusing, or is going to hurt me, or it's not useful. Those are a lot of assumption, right? Test them out, play with it, right? There actually, side note, there's a research on people who are like geniuses, these super smart people. Like what is a common connecting thread about all of them? These people actually are playful. They enjoy play. Play is part of the creativity, right? Because when you're playing, you kind of testing things, testing and learning, failing and all that. So that you can apply that as well. You don't have to be a super genius person, but you know, if you're playing with it, testing the things out and figuring out how does it actually work. Because the way we use it is not the same way you're going to use it, right? She mentioned coding. Actually, I'm a technical product manager, so I don't technically code, but I understand code. But for my startup, I wanted to analyze data. Essentially, that's what I'm doing, right? Images, videos, and text. And I actually build the MVP myself using ChatGPT. So I know what I wanted to do. I'll go and start, hey, I want to upload an image. Well, how do you write that code? It will write something, you can copy and paste, you can change it, and test it out yourself. So it actually walks you through the steps on how to do that. So it's not too far. It's like, now it's open, basically, right? You no longer need someone, you know, a super smart engineer. You can actually do it yourself if you're curious, right? We're not asking you to be coders, but we're asking you to be curious about it. So that is kind of the approach of using my mindset of a product management. Like, how do I approach the problem? How can I use it for my benefit, basically, right? Because you need it for you, not for anybody else. So that's kind of my approach into using the PM mind into solving problems.
Fantastic. Hector, I was wondering if I could follow up with you a little bit on Google offers an incredible amount of resources for people to learn to code. And we've been in an era of learn to code, apply for a job at Google, go, right? We're in a different era now with new tools. Can you say a little bit more about the resources Google is providing, kind of to Amnahir's point? It's not just doing Google search anymore. You guys are offering so much more. Gemini is in workspace. Like, tell us a little bit about where these tools are available, where folks can really leverage and start to get started.
Yeah, happy to. So, you know, I think to your point, these tools are becoming ubiquitous. They're really spread out through the suite of not just Google, but Microsoft and a lot of, I'm sure whatever email provider you guys use, whatever work suite unit you use is already integrating significant amounts of artificial intelligence into it. And you might not even notice it, but there's ways that subtly that's making your work more productive, more efficient. The ways that we're trying to infuse this and get this out into the world, again, with the acknowledgement that traditional education, this is very much going to challenge traditional educational pathways, right? The conventional 4 years at a four-year university and trying to get your degree, yeah, that's going to still be relevant for some competency building and for some fields. But by and large, especially for technical fields, by the time you start a degree and you graduate 4 years later, that technology that you learn on year one is going to be completely obsolete by year four, which is why I think it's so relevant to be tapping into some of these more bite-sized, more readily available tools and trainings. And there's ample out there. I'm not going to do a commercial for Google. We have plenty of those. I'm sure you can find them if you do a couple of Google searches. AI Essentials is one of them. But there's ample of resources out there that can train you in hours, a few days, to get a baseline competency for you to feel comfortable enough using any one of these large language models. And you can begin to see real use cases on how to begin to implement that into whatever challenge or work area you're facing, whether it be in a for-profit setting and trying to improve your communications with your team, or whether it be in a nonprofit setting and with fundraising and the increasing productivity in one way or another. Some of the cases that I'm particularly excited about, and we've seen some of these actually used, ironically enough, in higher education. We just did a big project with DataKind and John Jay College. John Jay College in New York, they were having an issue of graduation. I think their graduation rates were something in the low 50s, 53, 55%. And they had, like any institution, limited resources, limited counselors that they could be dedicating towards individuals. And they began to really wrestle on how to best do resource allocation, how to best put the limited number of guidance counselors against the individuals that needed it most. And they turned to AI. And what AI is really, really good at is taking a look at a broad range of data sets, a broad range of indicators, and sense make out of a lot of those indicators and help you create a strategy and deploy resources accordingly. They were able to take that 55% graduation rate and turn it into an 86% graduation rate by being able to deploy the guidance counselor resourcing. They didn't double the resourcing, they kept it flat. But what they did was deploy it more efficiently against the individual students that were at high risk of dropping out at the right moment in time where they needed that resource the most. And to me, that just speaks to the value of this technology. It's not about doubling down on the resourcing to yield better outcomes. It's about using the resources you have more effectively and more efficiently to yield higher outcomes. And that's just one use case. That same example methodology can be applied to many, many different use cases, and that can slowly but surely transform the world.
Amnahir, I'd love to follow up on, how do you keep up with the rate of change? You have gone to Stanford. You're clearly, a very proficient engineer. Can you say a little bit more about how do you keep up with the changes happening in the space? How do you make sure that you can find the latest and greatest? Or does that even matter? Is it more that you're driven from need rather than a desire to be informed about what's happening in the space?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. I think it's hard. I do a lot of different things. One, I like to talk to people, so I have a lot of friends, and they'll kind of keep me updated of what's new in their field, and I think that's really important. It's hard, especially so I guess to backtrack, one of the things I do first is Google Scholar is important for finding a lot of different journal articles and stuff in my field and seeing what new publications are coming out about the materials that I work with. And so you can create little markers so that it emails you, here are the top publications that have come out in the last week. This is how you can keep up to date. And you can do the same with a lot of different journals, and you can just have keyword searches that you want to be updated anytime something new comes out about that. I would say putting in AI might not be the best idea because I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands coming in all the time at this point. But I think that's a good place to start. But once you have a sense of what areas matter to you and what you care about, trying to stay up to date with the people you know who are working on that, or what journals are most up to date in that work. Where do people who are creating the new cutting edge AI or creating the new software, where are they posting to? Do they have blogs? Do they have YouTube videos? Do they have something else that you can kind of follow and track along? And I think that's what's really important. And then being aware of how diverse the issues are, because I think it's not only staying up to date with the technology. I think what you said was really important. When you're an engineer, you learn fundamental sciences and physics and all of that. But what really matters is you have to constantly be learning what's new, what's coming out, what's happening. And I actually went to like a reunion recently where someone was like, you should never study the sciences. And I was like, what? And he was like, what matters is the humanities. You have to see how to apply it, because well, obviously I disagree as someone with a degree in the sciences, but learning how to interact with people, learning how people think, learning these different perspectives is what you'd learn more in the humanities. And the sciences, the degree I got is essentially useless because every year something new comes out. So like the fundamental terms of understanding how technology works or how materials form will always be applicable. But what I've learned about this is the cutting edge and hard materials. This is the best glass there is out there. That's not true within a year. And so you have to always be learning and willing to read and stay up to date. And I think that's what's really important. And I think signing up for different journals, articles that might send you updates about these are crucial.
Yeah, one way I keep up with the latest changes, there's a guy, actually, a black guy who, his name is Cliff. So he has this Cliff Notes weekly insights that he emails. Oh, you know that? Yeah. And so he basically tests new AIs almost every day. And there's clearly something new every day. And that's one way I keep up, because there's no way I can keep up. There's just way too many. And so instead of trying to keep up, actually focus on what you care about the most. Right, so my biggest thing is trying to figure out how I can help families, how can I help them detect autism or other conditions as early as possible. So I'm reading a lot of research paper, reading a lot of, there's new models coming out trying to predict this by looking at just at a video of a child. So reading the results, seeing how they went about it, what data they used. So this is me. That's kind of me staying focused into my area. At the same time, reading these Cliff Notes, or maybe playing around with the new tool that launches, like, I don't know, some new model comes out, I'll just play around with it, see how it works. And actually people will reach out to me and say, hey, have you heard about this new thing? I'm like, oh, that thing? Oh, let me see what's it all about. So just staying curious and staying open, you basically stay up ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think that kind of got me thinking about something else that's important, which is using technology, especially up to date or the best technology, can help you a lot. But another thing that you should always stay up to date in is how people are reacting to that technology. I think for the longest time when I'd explain what my passion project is or what I wanted to work on, for a while I wanted to use like living cells within these clothing. Can adapt much better. They can react to the environment much better because biology just works better with other biological systems. Trying to tell that to people, they were disgusted. They were like, how would you ever put a cell on my clothes? How are you gonna ensure it doesn't actually touch me? This is so unsafe. Like all of this stuff where I think it's not only important to know what the technology is and what would work best, but how to market that. How would people actually react? Because I could make the best device in the world. If people aren't gonna use it, it doesn't matter, right? So I think staying up to date is important, not just from the technical standpoint, but also the social standpoint.
The component of Google that I worked in was Google X, and we had Google Glass, and everybody probably remembers the period of glass holes, et cetera. We thought it was the most brilliant thing ever, right? Like we were like, you can put a computer on your face, and everyone was like, but what are you doing when you have it on your face? Are you recording me? What's happening? So you're absolutely right. Like how people perceive a technology extends well beyond simply its capabilities. Hector, that kind of brings me to a point that Amnahir had raised that I kind of want to follow up on. This idea of the human-centeredness that's required to work in this technology. And I always envision Google.org as where human-centeredness goes to thrive, and given its mission. Can you say a little bit about kind of trust and that marriage between the engineering mindset and the humanities mindset? I ask as a theater major who was at Google, so help me out.
I love that. I love that question. And you know, really quick, I also think sometimes technologies are ahead of their time, right? Like Google Glass was super lame, whatever, 5 years ago, but now
computers are cool now,
right? Like Mark is not wearing his little Ray-Bans, and they're super cool, and people are paying a ton of money for them. So it's weird, you know. But yeah, so that's very much the lens we, you know, when early in my philanthropy career, someone explained philanthropy, corporate philanthropy to me in this way. Corporate philanthropy is a bridge, right? You're both serving as a bridge from the company to the community and from the community back into the company, and kind of helping liaise and also bring back feedback and the feedback loop and what have you. And I've really taken that to heart with the way that we execute and that I push my team to execute in the work that we do across the region. I really truly believe that for technology to be its best and for AI to be its best, that technology really needs to be proximate, and it really needs to not just be built in isolation in a lab in Silicon Valley and then pushed out to billions of people. I think that we've seen a lot of ways of how that does not turn out well. Rather, it's technology that needs to be built with and alongside of communities that are going to be leveraging it. And I think when you bring community into the fold, you begin to see that maybe the way that you were approaching it wasn't, maybe putting cells into your outfit wasn't going to really float. But there might be different ways of tackling it if you're bringing people into the fold early in the design process. And we wholeheartedly believe that the more funding that we as an organization put into equipping and ensuring that all communities have an equitable playing field, like they're going to be starting from the same baseline to be able to build and not just be adopters of technology, but also be builders of technology. And not only that, but they're going to be able to responsibly engage with this technology. We really believe that's going to yield a better, more equitable, more just society, more technologically forward society for all of us.
Riva, I'd like to turn it to you. There's one other topic I'd like to get to before we get to the audience, and it's the question of trust. Because you're working in, a diagnostic space with these technologies, we talked a little bit about privacy, data use, et cetera. Trust is such a core component of any aspect of creating any product at any time. Can you say a little bit about how, with your startup, you are engendering trust with the folks you are working with? Because these are parents with their children. I'd just love to get your perspective on trust in this evolution of breakthrough technology and use.
Yeah, no, that's very important. And actually, I'll start with a quick story of my journey into my startup. So working in tech, for quite some time now, and I saw the makeup of teams building these models or these AI systems across all companies, right? From Google all the way down to ChatGPT or OpenAIs and Anthropic. I didn't like the makeup of those people, right? It was basically a lot of white people. And I'm like, these people are making this building system that everyone's going to use. I'm like, well, something's wrong with that picture. I mean, they're a great engineer, I'm sure, like nothing's wrong with them, but just the makeup of them, and basically that's how we get a lot of bias into things, because the way I see the world, the way someone else sees the world is different. So I was like, well, I need to do something about that. What if I build something that I can influence as well, and instead of having the same kind of look of teams, develop this technology that we're all going to use. So that was kind of my start into my journey. And as far as building trust, so with parents, as you guys would understand, parents in here? Yeah. Kids are important. Kids are very important. We were all kids, and our parents did a wonderful job with us. And I have two little kids, 6 and 2, 6-year-old boy and 2-year-old girl, and they're the best. So we want to make the world, the best it can be for them, right? So as far as building trust, so I took the approach of like basically talking to parents one by one. And I give the example when we talked about this. So are you guys familiar with Waze? There's Google Maps, and then there's Waze. The way Waze was built, actually, I think it was genius. So they actually had one person drive around, or they deploy a bunch of people, drive around so they can map the road instead of relying on the old map. So they actually built it from the ground up, and Google ended up buying them, but which is totally fine. So yeah. It's business. But so I'm doing the same approach as far as like starting with parents, because especially with like development health of children, parents own the data. Like they're literally taking pictures of them every day. They have they're watching them every day. Even also healthcare professional like daycares or after school programs, they have firsthand data into what's going on in a child. So we want to use that data to help build the kind of, not predict, but to also trying to detect things that can happen with the child. So really starting one by one to build that trust over time, and that way we can build a network that can be valuable, not just for the current family, but also future families.
Thank you very much. I left at least one big topic on the table for you guys to take up in Q&A. I'm going to leave some extra time for Q&A because I know this is a hot topic. It covers a lot of things. I left DeepSeek on the floor for anybody who wants to ask about that. And I think I left one other topic, probably a little bit around design and, like, to Riva's point, who designs these models, et cetera. So for those of you who have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. I apologize if you've asked them in the Whova app. I don't have it in front of me, but happy to take questions. Yeah, got one in the back. Oh, can we get the microphone for translation? Yeah, thank you.
This is really a question about, we're here at the Festival of Diaspora, so we have an opportunity as this AI revolution is taking off within the United States. There's so much happening that's already happening to us, right, rather than with us or by us, right? So where are the plays, where are the opportunities throughout the diaspora where we could maybe start the revolution there? Like clearly you have the talent and expertise. Some people got the money. Right? Can we do this somewhere else? Like, can we build data centers? To your DeepSeek question, right? Like, is there a way for us to do this ourselves, right? And not knocking Google, but we don't need to rely on these big tech companies. They haven't been good to us, right? And clearly, you said you visited all these teams. We're still not represented there, but we're the first adopters. We're the ones that kind of drive the development, and you're like human skin suit is crazy. Like, that is wild. So clearly, like, we have the vision, right, of newness and ways to adapt. That's just our experience. And so I want to hear from you all, like, where can we go from here that is more geared towards centering us?
I'm curious who wants to take this one. Yeah? Riva, give it a start.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit as well. So as far as how do you basically use your local environment as your resource. So to me, again, starting with your use case, your problem, what problems do you have, right? And another kind of angle to this is there's a lot of talent here. I'm sure there are like local universities that are actually doing things about AI or actually building projects. I think supporting them is a great start. Like, if you support your local environment instead of relying on third parties or other countries, I mean, of course you will need to kind of pay attention to what's going on, but tap into that market first. I'm sure there's a lot of young kids today building cool projects locally here. So let's start with them. Let's highlight them. Let's give them a platform so that they can have a space and feel like they can build on top of that. So that's I think is major, just to tap into the local ecosystem. And as far as like data goes for these models, so depending on whatever job you have a data, like every touch point of your job has data in it, right? So whatever you do, when you go to your office, you log in, like all those are data points, right? And it's tied to you, your job, your function. So all of that can be used to train to kind of help figure out how to automate some of that stuff. So that's a start. Maybe start highlighting what the problems are, like what takes so long. And that's part of me being a product manager. You lay out your entire problem and you figure out like which part takes so long, which part is kind of tedious, which part I can do later. I need other people. And then you have a vision like, okay, this part needs some work, right? Can I automate it? Can I figure out how to make it more efficient? Can I figure out how to reduce it? Can I outsource it, to some AI system? So that's how you start thinking, and your problems become clear, and then you figure out how to solve for that.
Yeah, I think two things. One, I think there's no one-size-fits-all solutions here, right? Like, I think the model, the pathway that the US is going to take, that China's going to take, that the European countries are going to take for developing these technologies doesn't necessarily need to be the same path that Sub-Saharan Africa takes, that Latin America takes, that other countries take. So I think one kind of, how do we think outside the box and find alternate pathways to kind of leverage this technology in meaningful ways? The other thing that's the tough reality of this technology too is that while technology can be fairly democratized from an adoption and implementation perspective, it's quite costly. It's quite cost prohibitive to build new models, right? And deploy new models. When you look at we can talk about DeepSeek, but when you look at the billions that American companies have had to deploy against building these technologies, the energy consumption that these companies need to take in to be able to run the data centers that uphold these tools, right? Like, you think it's super easy to, oh, hi, GPT, like, you know, that's taking up a lot of computing power to get you that real-time answer that quick with factoring in all the models and all the things. That's a data center somewhere in Iowa that's consuming a ton of energy from the grid. So that, like, being conscious of like what some of these technologies, one, very cost prohibitive. So then how do you kind of think outside the box? How do you find new avenues, new models? And the second thing is, and here I do think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, is on the adoption side and the implementation side. We've seen, I mean, I've seen, and we've funded a tremendous amount of work in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, across the world, in markets where they're implementing and leveraging this technology for things that I think are super inspiring and really going to be transformative, right? I spoke earlier about what the magic tool here, that what these magic tools do is compile data and give you an output that you can act on. One way that they do that is, or one application of that is imagery, right? There's tons of satellite imagery out there. How can we be implementing that satellite imagery for flood forecasting, for fire prevention? I mean, we just saw what happened in LA. That was quite tragic. That had been prevented if we could have been using large language models to identify patterns in the landscape of Southern California that can anticipate a wildfire and take action ahead of time. A project here locally in Colombia that we funded with Universidad del Rosario in Bogota, that's using satellite imagery and AI, machine learning, to identify illegal mining operations. That's been another kind of breakthrough project where they scan the landscape of Colombia, identify the illegal mining operations, report that to local authorities, and they've been able to now shut down hundreds of illegal mining operations across the country. And now that technology is being adopted across Latin America and hopefully eventually globally, right? So I think from the adoption side, there's plenty of green pastures. I think on the kind of ground up, how do you build this technology, build these models? I think the cost prohibitive question is tricky, so then you really have to start thinking outside the box.
I'll just add two more quick things. Number one is, you mentioned that, you know, the big tech companies haven't been good to us. I think that one of the big things I learned working inside of Google is mindset goes a long way. And the mindset that powers a lot of the people who end up in positions to be making decisions in these organizations is one of self-belief. The ability to believe that you can be successful at what you seek to do and what you seek to achieve. If you have that mindset, which can be very, very hard to cultivate, and I told the executive who told me this, that this is true, can be very hard to cultivate when you are a member of an extreme minority within that environment. If you can cultivate that mindset, it will be extraordinary what you can achieve. The degree to which people in these companies are powered by mindset, correct me if I'm wrong, Hector, I can't overemphasize the degree to which that plays a role. So I would say start there. Start there. Don't look to the companies to provide you with the mindset or with the resources, et cetera. They're gonna operate in the way that they need to in order to be able to move the line up and to the right, right? They're corporations. Many of you are probably shareholders in those corporations. So at the end of the day, it gets down to how are you thinking about the problem. Yeah. Next question. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My question is more in the ethical part of AI. Last year, I was in an Aspen seminar. I know Aspen is popular here. And we were discussing about democracy and AI. And I learned that AI is not going to end the world with big machines that are going to kill us, but that maybe it's in the coding and the bias the code it is, that it could shape things. So I wanted to ask you, when you said you are not exactly coding, but you imagine what you're doing, and anyway, someone is going to code. How do you take care of that bias thing that could end up when you're coding in AI? Thank you.
I was wondering, Amnahir, would you like to take this as somebody who is coding?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think that's really difficult, and I think it's hard because there's a lot of nuance in what I'm gonna say, so I guess hopefully I don't accidentally misspeak, where it's one of those things where everyone says code is objective, it does what you tell it to do, and that is true. And I think that's where the confusion starts. Code itself isn't biased, it's the data you're putting into the code that makes the biases. And so it's really important to look where the data comes from. Are you getting it legally? Which may be a question for some AI chat boxes that are around. Who is benefiting from the data that you're putting in? Like, are you sure that you're putting in the diverse perspectives into the data that's being obtained? And are you really thinking about it super critically? Because I think one of the challenges, especially being surrounded by almost exclusively scientists, we like to think that the work we do is objective. We think like, oh, I'm creating this material and it is objective. I'm creating vaccines, they are objective. And then, right, like the example everyone thinks about is cameras being objective. You're just taking a photo and seeing that they're actually made to take good pictures of certain skin tones and not pictures of other ones. So you have to think a lot harder about, okay, I have the information, this is what's around, but who has collected this information? How have they collected this information? How was it obtained? How were people, even if it's just a yes or no question, what was the yes or no question that someone might have asked to get information about that is crucial when you're thinking about data, because again, the code itself is objective. So there's nothing wrong with the code that people are making. It's more of asking what is being implemented within it. And then I will also say, because I wanted to speak on this and didn't get a chance so far, so I'm just gonna jump in on it. I think right now in the US, there's a huge push for AI, a huge push for software. But again, I'm obviously biased. As a hardware person, there needs to be an equally large push into that area. As you said, AI isn't going to take over the world, but we need robots if we do want them. I mean, I don't want them to take over the world, but like we need that hardware as well to create these implements. But there is a lot of AI can change how people think, and people right now still have power. And so thinking about both of those is important.
Yeah, one more question. Yeah, I believe we have time for one more. Yeah. Oh, I've got, yeah, we'll be fast. We'll be super fast. Yeah, thanks.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'll try to be super fast, but any of you jump in on this. My question was about your work with autism and the data entry, that especially the subjective data that parents, parental bias is real. And how, can you just briefly talk about how you account for that, but also in terms of compounding the outliers, further isolating those who do fall out of your model, and it being yet another step to get a diagnosis. If you could just speak to that.
Yeah. So actually, quickly, there are some models who's trying to predict that you have autism. We're actually taking a step prior to that, trying to screen to see if there's indication that you will have autism, right? We're starting very young, 1 to 2. So you may have some indication. There's one, like they don't hear the name, or they put fingers in their eyes. So those are just obvious signs, right? So if you can collect enough of those signs, we can help, trying to get them to the next step, or get evaluated, connect them to a specialist who can help with that.
Excellent. Sounds like a great follow-up. Quick show of hands. How many of you learned something new in this panel? That's what I like to see. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a great lunch.